"Sir, I know how to make your daughter walk again," said the dark-skinned beggar boy to billionaire Richard Maddox. Richard had walked past that alley dozens of times, but never like this. Never with the creak of small wheelchair wheels next to his custom shoes. Never with silence pressing so tightly around him. His 8-year-old daughter Sophie sat quietly, wrapped in a knitted purple blanket. Her blonde hair draped over her pale cheeks, her eyes fixed on the sidewalk. She looked like she'd stopped waiting for miracles. Richard hadn't, not entirely, but hope had become a cruel word. Since the car accident 2 years ago, every expert he'd hired, doctors, therapists, even so-called miracle workers, had taken his money and given him the same answer: permanent spinal damage. "She may live a long life," they'd say softly, "but she'll never walk again." His fortune could buy anything except nerve recovery. That's when he heard the voice. "Sir, I can help your daughter." Richard paused, one hand still on Sophie's wheelchair. He turned around slowly, expecting to find a scammer. But what he saw instead was a small, barefoot child. He couldn't have been older than Sophie. He was black, thin, wearing an oversized hoodie, and covered in street dust. One of his eyes looked bruised, but his voice was calm and clear. "What did you say?" Richard asked. "I said I can help your daughter," the boy repeated. "Is this some kind of joke? Who told you to do this?" "No one. My name's Malik. I live behind the bus depot. I saw you pushing her yesterday. I waited here today because I knew you'd come." "You've been watching us?" "Yeah, but not in a weird way. I see a lot of people walk by, but she looked like she used to run, and now her legs forgot how." Sophie tilted her head slightly. That was more than anyone had said about her in weeks. "I've taken her to the best hospitals on earth," Richard said, voice tight. "Surgeons, neurologists, even people who claim to heal by moving energy. There's nothing left to try." "But you haven't taken her to my grandma," Malik said. "She helped me when nobody else could." "You're a kid." "I'm almost 10. Richard nearly laughed. "She doesn't take money, just trust. She never asks you to believe, only to try." Sophie looked up at her dad. "Can we go?" Richard hesitated. He wanted to say no, but her voice, broken and dry, echoed in his memory. "I hate being this way." He crouched to her level. "If anything feels wrong, we leave, okay?" She nodded. Malik smiled, turned, and walked. They followed. The path twisted through the city's forgotten edge, graffiti-stained bricks, thorny weeds, rusted fences. Sophie winced with every bump in the road. Richard nearly turned back, twice. But Malik kept glancing over his shoulder, calmly reassuring them. They reached a wooded trail. At the end stood a tiny cabin made of crooked timber and moss. It looked like something out of a fable. An old woman stepped out. Her hair was long, silver, woven with threads and bark. Her eyes were green and endless. "I was wondering when you'd bring them," she said to Malik. He didn't believe, but she did. The woman knelt before Sophie. "May I touch your knees, child?" Sophie looked at her dad. He gave a hesitant nod. The woman placed her palms gently over the girl's legs. She closed her eyes and began to hum, a low, breathy sound like wind in trees. Sophie flinched. "I felt something," she whispered. Richard rushed forward. "Felt what?" "A tingle in my toes." The old woman opened her eyes. Her spine isn't dead, just frozen, locked by grief. The body listens to the heart more than the brain. "That's not science," Richard muttered. "No," she said, "but science doesn't cry with your daughter every night." Malik spoke. "Can she try to stand?" "Only if she wants to," the woman replied. Sophie nodded. With help, she rose. Her legs shook. Richard lunged forward, but the woman held out a hand. One step, then another. She stood, wobbly, like a newborn fawn. Richard fell to his knees. "Sophie," she looked down at him, smiling through tears. "Daddy, I'm standing." He clutched her, afraid she'd vanish. Malik stood back, quiet. "Who are you?" Richard asked. Just a boy who believed people could be whole again, Malik replied. Richard pulled out his wallet. I'll pay you. Name your price. Malik shook his head. I don't need money. I needed someone to listen. Sophie walked another few shaky steps before falling. Richard caught her just in time. I've got you, he said. Tears spilled freely. She whispered, I felt my legs. You did, sweetheart, you did. The old woman stood behind them. No applause, just presence. How did you know? Richard asked Malik. I remembered, Malik said quietly. My grandma wasn't a doctor, but she knew pain, the kind no x-ray sees. She healed you? She reminded me I wasn't broken. Richard swallowed hard. Where is she now? Gone. A year ago. They called her a fraud. Tried to put me in the system. I ran. Now I help people who ask, people who believe. Richard offered him a future. School. Doctors. A home. But Malik shook his head. My place is here. In the places people forgot. That's where the hurt lives. That's where I'm needed. Richard handed him a card. If you ever need anything, you call this number. Malik tucked it carefully into his coat. Will I see you again? Sophie asked. If you ever forget how to believe, he smiled, I'll probably be nearby. She hugged him. A week later, Sophie walked across her school auditorium stage. No wheelchair, no braces, just trembling legs and fierce hope. When a reporter asked, what changed? She simply said, a boy who believed I could. That same morning, in an alley across the city, Malik sat beside a new girl. She had lost her voice after trauma. He didn't ask for her story. He didn't give food. He simply hummed the tune his grandmother once sang. Because healing doesn't always start with medicine. Sometimes it starts when someone refuses to walk away. This story reminds us that healing is not always found in prescriptions, machines, or expensive clinics. Sometimes healing begins with something far more human: presence, empathy, and the quiet strength of belief. Malik wasn't a doctor. His grandmother didn't wear a white coat. But what they offered was something the world often forgets: the power of emotional truth, of listening without judgment, of showing up for someone who feels invisible. In a society that often measures value by credentials and wealth, it's easy to overlook the wisdom found in the margins, in alleyways, in old cabins, in the hearts of children who have suffered and still choose to help others. This tale is not just about Sophie learning to walk again, it's about Richard learning to see again. To see that miracles don't always look like lightning bolts or magical cures. Sometimes they look like dirty shoes, a quiet song, and the willingness to believe one more time, even after you've stopped hoping. True transformation doesn't always happen in the spotlight. It often begins in silence. It grows in forgotten places, and it blooms when someone has the courage to say, I believe in you, even when the world says it's impossible. Healing is not just a medical journey, it's a human one. And sometimes all it takes is one person who refuses to walk away.